Let me tell you something that almost nobody is talking about right now. While the world was watching Russia rain over 600 drones down on Kyiv and Dnipro, killing 23 civilians in a single night, something else was happening, something quieter, something that, strategically speaking, might actually matter more. Ukraine's forces quietly shut down one of Russia's most critical supply lifelines, a 600-kilometer highway corridor that Russian military commanders had spent years building as their backup, their safety net, their last reliable road to keep their army in southern Ukraine alive. And here's the kicker. Russia was forced to block that route themselves, not because Ukraine physically occupied it, but because Ukrainian drones made it so deadly that their own trucks simply stopped moving. When an army can't move supplies, it can't fight. History is full of examples, and right now, in June 2026, Ukraine is rewriting the rules of how wars are won. Not on the front line, but behind it. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through is the full strategic picture. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how Ukraine is starving Putin's army alive. Before we get into what's happening right now, you need to understand the geography, because without it, none of this makes sense. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022, one of its first priorities was establishing what became known as the land bridge, a continuous strip of occupied territory running along Ukraine's southern coast, from the Russian border near Mariupol all the way to Crimea. Why? Because Crimea, which Russia illegally annexed in 2014, needs to be supplied. It's a peninsula. Before the land bridge existed, Russia had exactly one connection to Crimea, the Kerch Bridge, a 19-kilometer structure over the Kerch Strait that Putin personally opened in 2018 and called one of Russia's greatest engineering achievements. That bridge was Russia's military lifeline. Every tank, every ammunition truck, every barrel of fuel destined for Russian forces in southern Ukraine had to cross that bridge. Ukraine understood this perfectly. And in October 2022, Ukrainian intelligence services orchestrated a spectacular truck bombing that partially destroyed the bridge, setting oil tankers on fire and collapsing 2 car lanes. Then they hit it again in July 2023, and again. After the second major strike, Russian military commanders made a critical decision. Heavy military cargo, fuel tankers, armored columns, ammunition convoys would no longer cross the Kerch Bridge. It was too vulnerable, too symbolic a target. One more major hit could send the entire structure into the Kerch Strait permanently. So Russia pivoted to Plan B, the land bridge highway, specifically Highway R-280. A route that Russian occupation authorities had rebranded the Novorossiya route, running from Rostov-on-Don in Russia, through occupied Mariupol, Berdyansk, Melitopol, and all the way to Simferopol in Crimea. For Russian military logistics, this was their new backbone, their fallback, their supposedly secure rear corridor, running 80 to 120 kilometers from the front line, just far enough, they thought, to be out of reach. They were wrong. Let's talk about what's been happening on that highway in May and June of 2026, because the numbers are extraordinary. Since March 1st, 2026 alone, Ukrainian forces have neutralized 81 Russian air defense systems. Think about what that means for a second. Air defense systems are what protect Russian ground movements from aerial attack. You destroy enough of them, and suddenly the sky belongs to whoever has the drones. And right now, that's Ukraine. With those gaps in Russia's protective umbrella, Ukraine's unmanned systems forces began doing something methodical, systematic, almost clinical. They started hunting trucks, not tanks, not missile launchers, trucks, fuel tankers, supply convoys, the unglamorous essential machinery that keeps any army functioning. Open source analysts tracking geolocated footage confirmed that in May 2026 alone, more than 125 Russian supply vehicles were destroyed along the R-280 corridor and connecting highways, most of them far from the front line, deep in what Russia considered its secure rear territory. Videos published by Ukrainian units showed convoy after convoy being hunted down. And here's what made Russian commanders truly panic. Ukrainian drones weren't just hitting vehicles on the main highway. When Russian drivers tried to use field roads, dirt paths, bypass routes, the drones found them there too. The Ukrainians had figured out how to surveil and strike across all terrain types, making every alternative route equally lethal. The response from Russian military authorities and occupation administrations was essentially an admission of defeat. They restricted heavy equipment movement along the Novorossiya route. Officially, they blocked their own highway. Think about that for a moment. Russia spent years building this corridor, and they invested $11.8 billion between 2024 and 2026 in the Azov Ring highway network, specifically to reduce their dependence on the Kerch Bridge. And now, they're blocking it themselves because the sky above it is too dangerous. One retired major general in the Ukrainian army, Vladislav Kloshkov, described what was happening in precise terms. What is unfolding now across the Mariupol, Berdyansk, Melitopol, Crimea corridor is not simply a series of drone strikes. It is the systematic degradation of Russia's operational sustainment architecture. Russia is increasingly losing one of the key advantages it built after 2022, strategic logistical depth in the occupied south of Ukraine. Now here's where this story gets genuinely fascinating, and this is the part that mainstream media has largely ignored. The unit responsible for some of the most devastating strikes on that highway is the 412th Nemesis Brigade of Ukraine's Unmanned Systems Forces. On May 26th, they made an announcement on Telegram that sent shockwaves through military analysis circles. They revealed they had been using a secret drone, a weapon they described as secret strike wings that had not previously been seen in the public domain. A system developed specifically and optimized for exactly this kind of mission, hunting logistics vehicles deep behind enemy lines. Business Insider later confirmed the drone's name, the Morrigan, named after the Celtic goddess of fate and war. Here's what makes the Morrigan different. Most Ukrainian long-range drones that attack oil infrastructure or military bases inside Russia are large, expensive systems. Modified commercial aircraft or purpose-built weapons that cost significant money per unit. The Morrigan is different. It's a lighter, medium-range aircraft-type drone with a single propeller engine in the nose, manufactured entirely in Ukraine, specifically optimized to hunt moving targets at operational depth, that zone between 20 and 300 kilometers behind the front line. That operational depth zone is exactly where Russia's supply network lives. Command posts, fuel depots, ammunition warehouses, and most importantly, the trucks that connect all of those things to the front line. The Nemesis Brigade published footage of Morrigan operations in Crimea, hitting Russian air defense platforms, support vehicles, and logistics targets. This aircraft has repeatedly operated in Crimea, they stated, and destroyed key Russian air defense and support targets, and now it is conducting a logistical hunt from Mariupol to Crimea. Dozens of trucks destroyed, dozens of fuel tankers vaporized. And critically, Russia's electronic jamming systems, which have been so effective against Ukrainian FPV drones in frontline combat, appear largely useless against the Morrigan's targeting system. Ukraine has been careful not to explain why publicly, but the implication is clear. They built a drone that can operate independently, navigate without GPS if needed, and find its targets even in a heavily jammed electronic environment. This is the part where I want to be direct with you, because I think what's happening here is genuinely significant and it's not getting the attention it deserves. Ukraine is not just striking opportunistically. This is a coherent, deliberate campaign designed to accomplish a specific strategic goal. And in late May 2026, they made that campaign official. On May 27th, 2026, Ukraine's Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov made an announcement that formalized what had already been happening on the ground. Ukraine was launching a dedicated program called, and I love this name, the Logistical Lockdown. This is a $113 million initiative to systematically scale up medium-range drone strikes against Russian supply networks at operational depth. Not just the occasional strike, not just opportunistic attacks when a target presents itself. A dedicated, funded, industrial-scale program to strangle Russia's rear infrastructure continuously and relentlessly. The stated goal, in Fedorov's own words, our goal is to increase the pressure on the Russians in the rear even further and prevent them from carrying out active assault operations. Now, the important thing to understand here is that this is not new. It's formalization of something that was already working. Ukraine had been running a version of this strategy since early 2026, and the numbers were already showing results. The Institute for the Study of War reported that Ukraine had significantly intensified its intermediate-range strike campaign against dynamic targets in spring 2026, and that intensification directly correlated with slower Russian advances since late 2025. Let me give you some specific numbers to understand the scale of this. Ukrainian forces quadrupled their strikes on Russian logistics, warehouses, equipment, command posts, and supply routes at operational depth between January and May 2026. Between January and April alone, Ukraine conducted around 600 drone strikes on occupied territory, with heavy pressure in the south, where supply routes run as close as 90 kilometers from the front line. And here's the pattern that Fedorov highlighted. A pattern that the raw data confirms. The more Russian logistics infrastructure is destroyed, the fewer assault operations Russian forces can carry out on the front line. This is not a coincidence. This is cause and effect. If your trucks aren't delivering ammunition, your artillery goes quiet. If your fuel tankers are being hunted, your armored columns can't advance. If your command posts are getting struck, coordination breaks down. And if your air defense systems are being systematically neutralized, all of the above happens faster and worse. Ukraine isn't just targeting individual vehicles. They're targeting the entire system that keeps Russia's southern military group operational, and that system is showing very real signs of strain. I want to zoom out for a moment because isolated facts don't tell the whole story. You need to see how all of these pieces fit together. And when you do, the picture is genuinely remarkable. Start with the map. According to ISW data analyzed by Russia Matters, in the 4 weeks between May 5th and June 3rd, 2026, Russian forces recorded a net loss of 93 square miles of Ukrainian territory. That's nearly double the 46 square miles Russia lost in the previous 4-week period. Russia's 2026 spring-summer offensive, the one Putin's generals were promising would break Ukraine's lines, has effectively stalled. Now add the economic dimension. Russia's oil revenues in January 2026 fell to their lowest level since the COVID pandemic. Russia's largest oil company, Rosneft, reported a 70% drop in profits. The National Wealth Fund, Russia's emergency reserve, holds just $21 billion in liquid assets. That's barely enough to cover 1 year of budget deficit at current spending rates. And Russia's federal revenues in the first half of 2025 contracted by 16.9%. Putin is caught in a bind that his own economic advisors have been warning him about privately. Cutting defense spending would put the front lines at risk. But maintaining current spending levels is accelerating economic stagnation. There's no good option. Now add what ISW reported about the source of Russia's battlefield problems. This is the part that I find most strategically significant. ISW assessed that Putin has likely developed a false perception of Russian military successes. TASS, based on heavily exaggerated reports from his own military command. His generals are telling him things are going better than they are, and he's making decisions based on that false picture. This matters enormously for how we interpret Russia's behavior. The escalating drone campaigns against Ukrainian cities, 156 drones in a single night, 23 civilians killed. These look like desperation moves when you understand the strategic context. They're not winning the ground war. They're not winning the logistics battle. And the economic foundation of the entire war effort is eroding. Some military historians have compared Ukraine's current logistics campaign to the Kherson campaign of 2022, when Ukraine spent months systematically degrading Russian supply routes before Russian defenses in the south eventually collapsed. The parallel is imperfect. Every campaign is different, but the structural logic is the same. You don't attack an army head-on when you can starve it first. Russia's troops in Zaporizhia and Kherson are particularly exposed. Their supply system depends almost entirely on the narrow land corridor that Ukraine's drones are now turning into a killing ground for supply vehicles. Every destroyed fuel truck, every delayed ammunition shipment, every disrupted convoy adds cumulative strain to a logistical network that was already under pressure. And here's the thing about logistics wars. They don't deliver dramatic single moments that go viral. They're slow, grinding, invisible to the casual observer, but when they work decisively. So let me bring this all together because I want you to leave this video with a clear thesis, not just a collection of facts. Russia entered 2026 believing its land bridge was secure. It had spent billions building it. It had displaced its military logistics from the vulnerable Kerch bridge onto a highway system it thought was beyond Ukraine's reach. Ukraine's response was patient, methodical, and devastatingly effective. First, they systematically dismantled Russia's air defense coverage, neutralizing 81 systems since March alone. Then, with that umbrella gone, they deployed a new generation of medium-range drones, including the secret Morrigan, to hunt supply vehicles across hundreds of kilometers of occupied territory. Then, they formalized the strategy into a $113 million program, Logistical Lockdown, designed to turn this from a campaign into a permanent strategic condition. The result? Russia's own commanders blocked their own highway. The Novorossiya route, the last reliable land supply corridor to Crimea and southern Ukraine, has become, in the words of one analyst, a highway to hell for Russian supply convoys. Now, will this end the war? No. Russia still controls significant territory. It still has the manpower, even if bleeding at a rate of up to 35,000 casualties a month, according to Zelensky. And it still has the political will for now to keep fighting, despite an economy that is quietly hollowing out beneath the war effort. But here's what I want you to watch in the coming weeks. Watch whether Russian assault operations in the south start declining in frequency. Watch whether the front line in Zaporizhia and Kherson starts shifting. Watch whether Russian commanders start redeploying forces in ways that suggest supply shortages are affecting their operational options. Because if Ukraine's logistical lockdown is working the way the early data suggests, what we're watching right now is not a sideshow. It's the opening act of something much bigger. The war in Ukraine is not won or lost in a single dramatic battle. It's won or lost in thousands of decisions. Each one about where the next fuel truck goes, whether the next ammunition convoy makes it through, whether the next supply depot survives until morning. Ukraine has decided that the next battle isn't going to be fought on the front line. It's going to be fought 100 kilometers behind it. And right now, they're winning it. If this analysis gave you a perspective you couldn't find anywhere else, subscribe, share this video, and I'll see you in the next one.